A woman walks alone down a quiet street in the middle of the night. The road is empty, but she is not alone. A man in a hoodie and a face mask follows closely behind her. Moments later, he kidnaps her and drags her into an empty room. During the struggle, a blind man passing by hears the commotion, but instead of stopping, he keeps walking. This is Close Your Eyes. The next day, the woman is found dead, her hands tied inside a room. Snow falls as the police arrive to investigate the scene. Among them is Detective Deok Gu. While examining the room, he notices a red cross symbol drawn on the wall, clearly left behind by the killer. Somewhere else, a blind man named Hyun Woo is performing music at a shopping center. As he plays, a man named Chung Soo approaches him. This is not unusual, since Chung Soo often visits him there. But this time feels different. Chung Soo casually tells him that he has just killed someone. He even describes the murder in detail. Hearing this, Hyun Woo becomes uneasy and assumes it is just a lie. Chung Soo laughs, then admits that he is actually working on a new novel about murder. After Chung Soo leaves, a group of high school girls who admire Hyun Woo gather around him and give him gifts. Not long after, a tired-looking student named Mi Rim arrives at the shopping center. She notices her classmates crowding around Hyun Woo and waits until they leave before approaching him. She seems a bit annoyed, especially seeing how many gifts he receives. Mi Rim often visits Hyun Woo, and this time she brings up the recent murder. She remembers that the victim once came to Hyun Woo while drunk, talking about her upcoming wedding. Thinking about what Chung Soo said earlier, Hyun Woo suddenly feels uneasy and tells Mi Rim to go home before it gets dark. As Mi Rim is about to leave, a cleaning worker notices bruises on her face and asks what happened. Mi Rim simply brushes it off, saying she fell earlier. Later, Mi Rim returns home, where she lives with her abusive father. As soon as she arrives, he orders her to get him alcohol. When she does not respond the way he wants, he throws a bottle at her and starts beating her repeatedly. Mi Rim does not fight back. She just stands there and takes it. Tired of living like this, she finally decides to run away that very night. At the same time, Hyun Woo hears noise on his way home. Police officers are questioning people on the street about the murder from the night before. This reminds him of Chung Soo's story, so he quietly takes another route to avoid them. When he arrives at his apartment, he takes off his glasses and looks at himself in the mirror. All this time, he has only been pretending to be blind. Somewhere else, a man struggles to push his cart up a quiet uphill road. Out of nowhere, a stranger steps in and helps him, making it easier to reach the top. But just as things seem fine, the stranger suddenly attacks him, knocks him down, and ties his hands. The next day, the police discover the man's body inside an empty room. They begin to suspect that this murder and the previous one are connected, likely done by the same person. However, they still cannot figure out the motive behind these killings. Back at the station, the case becomes a point of tension. Detective Deok Gu, a senior officer, is technically not supposed to handle it. Even so, he steps back officially, but continues investigating on his own. Using a map in his office, he starts looking for connections between the locations where the bodies were found. Soon after, he leaves the station with two of his colleagues, heading out to follow a lead. At the shopping center, Hyun Woo is approached once again by Chung Soo. Just like before, Chung Soo casually explains in detail how he supposedly killed someone the night before. But when he notices Hyun Woo getting uneasy, he quickly brushes it off, saying it is just part of the novel he is writing. Not long after, Mi Rim arrives after school and tells Hyun Woo about the latest victim, an older man who was found dead the previous night. As people nearby overhear the conversation, they start gathering and discussing the ongoing murders. Suddenly, Detective Deok Gu and his team show up. He questions Hyun Woo and shows him several CCTV photos, revealing that both victims had previously visited him. Hyun Woo explains that the people who come to him usually just share their personal stories. Nothing unusual. Even so, Deok Gu hands him a business card and asks him to reach out if he remembers anything suspicious. Now working part-time as a shop attendant, Mi Rim receives a message on her phone during her shift. The landlord is demanding payment for several months of unpaid rent. Not knowing what to do, she tries to borrow money from her boss, but he refuses. Left with no options, she finishes her shift and heads home feeling defeated. On her way back, Mi Rim starts to feel like someone is following her. When she turns around, there is no one there. She tries to stay calm, convincing herself it is nothing, even as her mind keeps racing about how she is going to survive without money. At the same time, Hyun Woo is also on his way home, lost in thought. He cannot stop thinking about what Chung Soo said. The murders described in his so-called novel are starting to look a little too similar to the real crimes happening around the city. Time passes, but the police still cannot find a suspect behind the serial killings that continue to haunt the city. The number of victims keeps rising, making the situation even more alarming. During a meeting, Detective Deok-gu and his team discuss the case, but a junior officer suddenly walks in and complains that the investigation should have already been closed due to the lack of solid evidence. In the middle of that tension, a phone call comes in. The caller is Hyun-woo. He claims to have a clue about the murders, but the moment he is asked to come to the station, he abruptly hangs up. Frustrated, Deok-gu immediately orders his team to trace the location of the call. The junior detective looks annoyed, feeling that he should be the one giving orders since he is officially in charge of the case.
출동 명령은 내가 내린 거야, 내가!
At the same time, Mi-rim arrives at her boarding house, only to hesitate when she sees her landlord waiting outside. She remembers what happened earlier when the landlord tried to take advantage of her. He offered to let her skip the rent if she agreed to sleep with him.
월세를 꼭 돈으로 해결해야 된다고 생각하지 마. 아이, 다른 방법도 얼마든지 있잖아.
Still shaken and afraid, Mi-rim decides to walk away instead of going inside. As she continues down the street, she notices Hyun-woo walking alone. She quietly follows him from behind, but Hyun-woo quickly senses that someone is trailing him. When they reach his apartment, Mi-rim wedges herself at the door and begs to stay just for one night. With neighbors starting to gather and watch the situation, Hyun-woo has no choice but to let her in. That night, he is forced to keep pretending to be blind inside his own home. Later, Mi-rim opens up about her feelings for Hyun-woo. She is drawn to his kindness and the way he listens to people's stories while performing at the shopping center. As she moves closer to him, one of his fingers gets caught on her bracelet. She explains that it was a gift from her mother, and she has been told never to take it off until the day she gets married. The next morning, the police manage to locate the public phone Hyun-woo used to make the call. Noticing a CCTV camera nearby, they begin reviewing the footage to identify who entered the booth that night. Elsewhere, a disturbing scene unfolds in a hidden room. Various knives are neatly arranged on a table, while the walls are covered with photos of past victims and future targets. Among them is a photo of Mi-rim being beaten by her father. Meanwhile, Deok-gu returns to the shopping center and confronts Hyun-woo again. He reveals that he already knows Hyun-woo was the one who made the call. Hyun-woo tries to deny it, but it does not work. Deok-gu then asks to see his disability identification. As he checks the details, he carefully watches Hyun-woo's eyes, trying to confirm whether he is truly blind or not. Not long after, Chung-soo shows up and notices the police around the area. Hyun-woo brushes it off, saying he was just told to be careful when going home at night. Chung-soo simply laughs, then casually asks for ideas about what kind of murder he should write next. That alone is enough to make Hyun-woo uneasy. Before even getting a response, Chung-soo randomly points at a woman passing by in the distance, as if choosing his next subject. At that moment, Hyun-woo secretly takes a photo of her with his phone. He almost gets caught, but luckily someone approaches them and distracts the situation. That night, when they return home, Hyun-woo tells Mi-rim that she should leave his apartment. Before going, Mi-rim notices a photo of twin children in his room and asks about it. Hyun-woo avoids answering, and Mi-rim eventually leaves after giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. After she is gone, Hyun-woo looks at the photo again. It is a picture of him and his twin brother. In reality, his brother was the one who was truly blind. Because of that, his brother was often bullied by other kids. As he reflects on those memories, his attention shifts to the dining table, where Mi-rim has quietly prepared a meal for him. Outside, Mi-rim begins to feel like someone is following her. When she turns around, she sees a masked man chasing her. Panic takes over as she runs as fast as she can, until she falls right in front of the shop where she works. The presence of other people inside scares the attacker away, and he quickly disappears. The next day, Mi-rim goes to see Hyun-woo, still shaken and in tears, as she tells him what happened the night before. Based on the description, Hyun-woo becomes more convinced that the man is Chung-soo, since he always shows up wearing a hoodie. Determined to confirm his suspicion, Hyun-woo decides to follow Chung-soo and find out where he lives. Not long after, he sends the police a photo of Chung-soo, along with his full name and address. One night, Mi-rim does not realize that someone has followed her all the way back to her place. While she is cooking noodles in her room, her landlord suddenly shows up again and tries to pressure her. In response, Mi-rim throws the hot broth at him and runs out. But outside, the masked man is already waiting. This time, he manages to catch her, drug her, and drag her into a room. The next day, while performing as usual, Hyun-woo starts to notice that Mi-rim has not shown up. A sense of worry grows, and he reports her disappearance to the police. During this process, Detective Deok-gu finally uncovers the truth that Hyun-woo has been pretending to be blind. Because of this, Hyun-woo is detained at the police station. There, Hyun-woo reveals his past. As a child, he lived in an orphanage with his blind twin brother. Sometimes he would pretend to be blind by wearing his brother's sunglasses, and at first it felt like a harmless game. But everything changed one day when he witnessed the caretaker poisoning two children to harvest their organs. In a moment of panic, the caretaker mistook Hyun-woo for his blind brother and told him to leave. His actual brother was then beaten by the caretaker. As Han-woo tried to escape, his brother fell down the stairs and died. From that moment on, Hyun-woo continued pretending to be blind, out of fear that if the truth came out, he would be killed as well. After hearing the story, Deok-gu informs him that the caretaker had already been arrested 7 years ago for child trafficking. But just as things seem to settle, Chung-soo suddenly walks into the police station and turns himself in. He confesses to being the serial killer behind the recent murders. The police immediately arrest him, and the news spreads quickly, even reaching the ears of the real killer. Meanwhile, Mi-rim manages to free herself and rush out of the room. But her escape does not last long. The kidnapper quickly catches her, drags her back inside, and ties her up again. At the same time, Hyun-woo, who has just been released from the police station, suddenly recalls something Chung-soo once said about being a witness to a murder and turning it into a novel. That detail starts to bother him. The more he thinks about it, the more certain he becomes that Chung-soo is not the real killer. Someone else is behind all of this. Determined to find Mi-rim, Hyun-woo begins putting the pieces together. One day while performing, he notices Mi-rim's phone sitting in a cart being pushed by a cleaning worker. Sensing something is wrong, he quietly follows the man and sneaks into the back of his pickup truck. Inside, he is shocked to discover a dead body. Before he can react, the man returns. With no way out, Hyun-woo hides and stays with the truck. When the man finally stops and steps away, Hyun-woo slips into a nearby house. From behind a door, he sees Mi-rim lying on the floor, tied up with her mouth sealed. She notices him too and quickly signals for him to stay away. But it is too late. The man suddenly attacks Hyun-woo with a stick, and a violent fight breaks out. In the chaos, Mi-rim is thrown from the upper floor. Luckily, she manages to grab onto a hanging chain. As she struggles to hold on, the chain tightens around the attacker's neck. The harder she pulls, the tighter it gets, until he can no longer breathe. Eventually, the man collapses. After that, Hyun-woo pulls the chain to help Mi-rim back up. In the end, the police arrive at the house just as Mi-rim and Hyun-woo leave the scene together, walking side by side, holding hands. So the moral of the story is, if someone keeps describing murders in crazy detail, maybe don't just assume they're writing a novel and casually hang out with them like it's a book club.